Добрий день, вітаю всіх, хто прийде.
Hello, I welcome everyone that has joined us today. My name is Olga Atamanova, and we invited you today to listen to the analytical report, Communication between Families of the Fallen and Military Units. The organization Media Initiative for Human Rights conducted a deep study of these problems, and we will be discussing this topic today. I would like to introduce to you today's speakers. This is Olena Kopina, reports author and contributing expert. Also, Olena Belyachkova, coordinator of the groups of families of POWs and missing persons at the Media Initiative for Human Rights. Yuliia Sharapaniuk, head of the Association of Families of Missing and Captured Soldiers. Today with us we have representative from the Office of Ukraine's Commissioner of Missing Persons under Special Circumstances, and a representative from the Central Department of Civil Military Cooperation of Ukraine's General Staff. Hello, thank you for joining us today. Let's hear from Olena first. So what are the problems that we have in communication between the families and the families of the fallen and the military organizations? I have to say that there is a perfect communication between the portions of the governmental bodies, but there is no communication whatsoever between governmental organizations and the private and living persons, so to say. And what we are facing in a lot of cases is kind of indifference towards real people from the side of the governmental organizations. For example, if we take the situation around the fallen. Once I had to initiate a criminal investigation about a deceased person, and we had documents that were proved that the deceased person was indeed the person in question. However, we faced a lot of red tape from the government side. So what we were really facing is a complete indifference until we started addressing different bodies and different governmental bodies. So after the DNA sample was found a match, I had to and I addressed a official governmental body to communicate with the family of the deceased person. I just met complete and total indifference and refusal. And in cases like that, what I have to do is to try and find the families, the relatives of the person in question by myself. There was another case. Well, there was a case when a military person was deceased. However, officially he was considered AWOL, and in order to remove this status from this deceased person, I had to address some my private connections, so to say. But we are trying to fight things like that. Like, for example, if we take a cooperation in terms of salary, there is a lot of negative nuances when the family members address us and ask about the financial compensation for the deceased relative. In cases like that, there is a request, an official request for compensation, and it is often really hard to process it. Also, recently, after the law about the compensation to the relatives of the missing persons or killed or persons killed in action, the people have to write those requests again for the second time. And in many cases, people face kind of bureaucratic obstacles when there is really like this is not their priority, and sometimes requests that are being approved and requests that are being not approved, there is no logic to how the selection happens. And again and again we're facing cases like these. Also, if we take moral, ethical side of this question, and we were asking the representatives of the government, he was smiling when answering question about if we can take bodies, if we can take away the bodies from the morgue. After the gliding bomb explosion and consequential victims of this explosion, the official representative of the government that was that was answering question about why did this happen, he said to the wife of a deceased person that it was her husband who was at fault, and I don't. And this like it's a huge amount of negative experience that we are getting around the deceased and killed in action and missing in action persons.
So I think that if that responsibility will be vested, I mean the responsibility for the work with on interaction with the families of the deceased ones will be vested in a commander of the military unit. I think that's not going to work. A large amount of our defenders are not on the registers. I collect the data myself. I check the registers myself, and I found out that there are no criminal cases initiated against some of them, and I try to address those issues with Mr. Arthur. However, I have no access to all of the lists of our missing in action as well as prisoners of war. I'm not sure if they are all submitted for the commission, and in relation of whether it's in relation of all of them, the fact of deprivation of freedom was initiated. So basically, I have almost non-communication with the commander of the military units, commanders of the military units, including the one that is in charge for communication with the families of our military unit, because I understand that basically I do their job. Yuliia, you recalled the name Artur Rinatovich a couple of times, who keeps helping you on a systemic basis in this work. So just for our understanding, who is that person, just for those who don't know the names? Well, that's the commissioner for the missing in action, and I really appreciate all his input, because it may look surprising when the commissioner himself listens to the sister of missing in action. Meanwhile, the military unit is being hostile themselves. Thank you for sharing your experience, Olena. Now the floor is yours. You were researching that matter on a systemic basis. So what are the most widespread problems, given the experience obtained by those that you were in touch with, and what could be your recommendations? Thank you. My name is Olena Kopina. I'm a mother of a warrior missed in action, NGO 3017. And basically what Ms. Yuliia is talking about now was very illustratively reflected in those interviews that were undertaken during the research. The research was going on in January and February. It covered the representatives of the families of those missing in action and prisoners of war and the fallen warriors, with representatives of the military units, including the commissioned officers from CIMIC department. And there was another interview with the mentioned Mr. Arthur. I really joined that appreciation. I think it is good evidence of how better the families feel when they get in touch with the professionals. And also that research covered the work with the materials that were already prepared. And I keep track of this topic since my son went missing in March 2023. The amount of analytical materials has grown significantly. Previously, they were just materials in printed media and online. Meanwhile, now we're talking about serious analytical organizations paying attention to this matter, to these problems of the families of those missing in action and prisoners of war. So our research was focused on interaction of the families with the representatives of the military units and territorial staffing centers. So basically those problems that Ms. Yuliia has listed, yes, they exist. And let me add that those are also problems with notifications, errors in notifications, the way the notifications are being served, how the families are being notified about their loved ones either being missing in action or being captured prisoners of war. So they all are violation of ethics. And sometimes the people who notify the families, they are not psychologically ready for such kind of conversations themselves. And families sometimes experience difficulties with retrieving the personal belongings of those missing in action or fallen during the battles, and also the families experience difficulties with getting excerpts from the investigation documents. Again, those documents, they contain errors that result in misunderstandings, a lot of them. And basically what I wanted to say, look, a military unit, is a key point in this information chain the family has to follow when they find out what's really going on. So starting with the absence of connection with the loved one, like whom should I address? If I give my son to this military unit as a mother, whom do I address? I address commanders, brothers in arms. I try engage in some strings to pull, and depending on the way the information is being provided, my condition depends on it as well. And if that information is not sufficient, I'm gonna start pulling strings. And the families start communicating in the Telegram channels. They address the brothers in arms. They call phones of the commanders or deputy commanders of the military units. And when we try to reach them, it all results in additional nervousness and mutual accusations on both parts. The commanders are saying we're out of time, we're fighting in the front lines, we don't have time for your stuff, and the families are saying, like, come on, we've given your children to you and you refuse to help us. So basically, let me repeat myself, a lot depends on the military units themselves, the kind of information that is being provided, then the salary depends, or the reimbursement depends on that information, and the speed of provision, and then where those requests are being forwarded. Either there is a crisis support necessary for the family, or organization of a funeral, or organization of investigation and search. So the factors that influence on the families and on their communication with the military units, like when it comes to the families, when it comes to the military units, where are they located? What is their staff? And do they have an HR department? Do they have a patronage service? And what I would like to emphasize, just like Ms. Yuliia has emphasized, it's the personal factor in interaction with the families. Like, everything depends on specific person. To what extent are they professional in fulfilling their obligations? To what extent do they adhere to the ethical standards of communication? How psychologically stable are they? What are their soft skills like empathy, compassion, that are so needed by the families given the conditions they ended up in? And let's be honest, depending on where the military units are, what is the amount of losses, then those are other factors on which the speed of document processing may depend. Again, when it comes to the families, what are the factors of influence? It's the psychological stress they are experiencing, and also let's not forget that along with the stress, there is the family's capability to get themselves together and act constructively. But again, it depends on personal factors. If, for example, I'm psychologically stable and resilient, if I have a huge social capital, like I have a lot of connections, I can call my colleagues, I can call families of other warriors, I can orient myself what government authorities I should address, I can engage my personal connections. And again, it all depends on my resources, like to what extent I'm still capable of processing all of that. So this productivity helps those military units, because thanks to such persons as Ms. Yuliia, who establish informal unions, who register civil organizations, the families really enjoy support. It's a personal support, again, psychological support, thanks to which you can hold on meanwhile investigation is in process, or meanwhile you're experiencing that loss. And Ms. Olena might tell you a little bit more about the role of civil organizations and what's on. Again, you know, such a thing, it's a 21st century outside. You just grab your computer or cell phone, you check the algorithms, roadmaps that exist for those for search of those missing in action, or algorithms in case when your loved ones may be deceased. But sometimes people have dumb phones, and depending on where they are, they have relevant level of access. You know, during one of the interviews with one of the representatives of Mr. Arthur's office, it was said about that when the people come from the villages, they may have dumb phones with buttons only, and they cannot get relevant level of support. And again, we're getting back to the fact that on top of the military units, there are authorities which provide coordination support, like the Office for Coordination of the Families of those missing in action, and the help and solution of those problems that were mentioned here by Ms. Yuliia. And talking about the support of civil organizations, they do a great job. They in fact support those government authorities that support us to a certain extent. And I had an interview with the CIMIC officer. He said that thanks to the unions of families, I have contacts with the families of those missing in action and prisoners of war and fallen warriors, and thanks to those unions, I can respond immediately. Like, for example, in case of payments, now the procedure for disbursements has changed, and the military units have to update the information, like who may claim those payments, how to distribute them. He says, like, I only have to ask, and the union of families help me to gather all that information. So again, this cooperation is a supporting factor for all of the parties involved. Now about the recommendations. The first recommendation to the department, to the Office of the Commissioner for the missing in action, there was initiative to establish an information platform to coordinate the notification of the families, and we have a request to expedite the establishment of this information platform and to help the families in such a way. Another thing is about the Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Internal Affairs to pay attention to the professional selection, to screening of those people who serve in the patronage services or social support services. I mean, in the National Guard, this is where the social services work, or patronage services, to pay attention not only to people's capabilities to fulfill their duties in a responsible manner, but also to have some emotional response skills and psychological resilience skills. And here I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the representatives of military units who work with the families, representatives of territorial staff and offices, they have a secondary trauma and they experience professional burnout. So probably we should pay attention to this to help people to recover so that they don't inflict additional damage due to their professional burnout. Also, I think that to avoid conflicts, they need to be prevented at the stage of mobilization. The families should be provided information about what to do in case a person is going missing or is being captured a prisoner of war, or it may unfortunately be deceased. So, to provide this information only through civil organizations or through An officer is a whole different thing. The family should be prepared that there are certain algorithms and they should act in accordance with them in case of any tragic situation. So basically, that's it for me. Give me just a second. Yeah, to provide crisis psychological support to the families, assign an officer for every family in case of a tragedy, and cooperate with the civil organizations. Ms. Olena, a question right away. We all understand that in situations like this, it's either human factor that acts negatively when there is a complaint, or the algorithms fail to work. So according to your experience, according to the survey that you've conducted, what is working or not working mostly? Is it human factor, or is it a problem with the algorithms and procedures that our state can influence?
Unfortunately, I don't have statistics within the frame of this study. But I would say that the human factor influences the access to those algorithms. And algorithms work only thanks to the cases that happened before that, like on the precedence principle. The same could be said about the cooperation between the military unit and the family, for example. And the family condition and the condition of the family of a family is very important. Like imagine they are getting this terrible, horrible news, and they don't know what to do, and they don't really, their rationale is not working at the time. Like imagine, because of the emotional pressure and all the other factors. So the work, the cooperation, the format of cooperation between the military units and the families of the fallen soldiers could be different depending on many factors. Thank you. We know, we hear from the families of the fallen that there are problems with communication and cooperation in the area of the cooperation between the military institutions and the families of the fallen soldiers. So the question is, with what questions can the families go to address to you? Hello. First of all, hello everybody. And before I answer your question, I would like, but before that, I would like to express my gratitude to the people engaged in the search and rescue of the prisoners of war and captives. Also, if we are talking about the communication between the military units and the families, unfortunately, we, as a department of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, we can't really influence military units. We cannot force them to overstep, their duties, and a lot of things depends on the specificity of the military unit we are talking about, and in many cases, as it was already stated before, it's a kind of subconscious it's a subconscious image of the military units not communicating with families because they cannot, although the perception is that they don't want to, but this is not the case because if we take into account the sheer amount of the prisoners of war and of the people missed in action, they are also under a huge pressure, and in terms of organization, and also we need to understand that apart from the question of the communication between the families, family members, and the military units, there is a lot of other adjacent questions, like bureaucratic particularities, and sometimes people that are in charge of bureaucratic procedures, that they don't even know the amount of the paperwork they are supposed to fulfill, and during the occupation of our territories, we have to process a lot of different documents for the local population, and the question of the service checks of the people that are being accountable in those areas, they sometimes simply cannot answer the questions simply because of the the confusion in the papers after the like, for example, there is names and surnames, and there is lists, and sometimes it's just a simple mistake in the name that could be a reason for inability to process some kind of paperwork. Like, for example, we had this funny situation when one person received 4 different summons to the military service. So sometimes when a person comes to us and we start explaining to them what exactly they are supposed to fill out, we cannot really provide them even a sample of how this request is supposed to be fulfilled. However, you're talking about, if we're talking about the communication between military units and the families, the family members. And I, as a Ministry of Internal Affairs representative, I had cases in my career when I had to communicate with family members of a deceased person, and this is kind of hard, to inform family members of a deceased person about the occurrence, and these and you simply sometimes don't know what to expect as a reaction from the people related to a person that died, you know. So we really do understand so that among these people that bring this summons to other people, they can be not they can be unprepared themselves, you know. So for in other cases there is people. So, this is like just a simple little example of how the things can happen, you know, and so there is no simple answer to this question. Of course, such analytical report that we are discussing here today, they are relevant, but not that important, to be honest, in practice. Also, when we're talking about the talking about the fulfillment of the legal norms regarding our functions, there is 3 directions of our work. This is we are maintaining a single register of the people that are missing in action. Also assigning a status of a MIA or KIA to a person from the point of view of the legal procedures. Also, what is also important is how this status gets removed after a person is found, or the remains of a person were found. Also, after that comes a lot of different legal questions. For example, the property of a deceased person, and so on and so on. In terms of communication with the families of the fallen soldiers, we do have we accept visitors we officially receive visitors. We have a hotline, hot phone line, and also we have representatives in 13 oblasts. Those are our employees that are working remotely, and they are in charge of directly communicating with local territorial staffing bodies and other military or and administrative bodies. Unfortunately, we don't have representatives in all the oblasts. However, if a person addresses to us, and we are trying to listen to them, understand them, and help them as much as possible. Also, about coordination. Coordination for us means the involvement of all the bodies, administrative, military, civil, and so on, that are involved in the process of communication between between the military units and the families of the deceased soldiers. And like, for example, the example that we heard here today, like a person missing in action that has been announced AWOL. This is ridiculous. Yes, of course it is. And so this is the situations. These are the situations that we are trying to deal with, like, because simply a court cannot assign a status of AWOL to a person that has a status of missing in action person assigned before that. So beside that, we are doing the DNA match studies investigation in the and it's really it's the communication is well established with the institution that does that, and
the institutions in charge for that, they were submitted to their regional administrations, and they really had different visions of the procedures. So the procedures were basically different for all of them. Now they are all submitted to Ministry of Health, and they have the common vision in terms of repatriation, in terms of communication with the investigation authorities. Before that, it was way more difficult. So little by little, gradually, it's still moving in the direction of the better. And talking about the search among the survivors, first of all, it's about communication with the coordination headquarters on handling of the prisoners of war, United Security Service Center, those who work directly with the International Committee of Red Cross, and talking about the most up-to-date technologies. In our department, we, on a daily basis, our representatives using the OSINT technologies, open source intelligence technologies, like when you search information from the open sources online. So using different modules, we exercise monitoring of different channels, including the enemies ones, including YouTube channels, anything, all kinds of information where we can come across an image of our civilians or military. Those can be their court, those can be the confinement facilities. So in any pictures we try, in any videos, any footages, we try to recognize our people, and on a daily basis we get 30 to 50 positive responses that we document. Then we hand over that information to police, to the coordination headquarters of handling of the prisoners of war, and to International Committee of Red Cross, so they take actions to officially confirm the status of those persons identified. Sometimes it happens that they are already aware. Sometimes the families may be already aware about that information, because we have to understand, like, search and investigation are different things, because investigation is something that happens within the framework of court or trial investigation, and the search is something that involves families or some organizations. So those are basically the key areas we work in. and without them we couldn't have been able to make it. And again, we can initiate amendments to the legislation to solve other issues that people try to address with us, because sometimes they address us with the issues that we're not in charge in, but we cannot respond like we are not in charge about this. We just try to get that body, that authority involved, which is in charge of this or that matter, or somehow to get the families in touch with them. So this is basically our job. Thank you, Mr. Dmitro. And now, Mr. Oleg, I'm having a question to you. First of all, there was a lot said about the communication between the families of the MIS and KAS with the military units. So do you have any influence over this process if your organization can do that? So in which way? And also I would like to ask you about the coordination of search and investigation. How is it organized actually? Good afternoon, everybody. Colonel Neshadim, Central Department of CVS. First of all, I would like to ask Ms. Yuliia apologies for incompetence of the representative of the Brigade number 115. That's unacceptable. And on my behalf, I'm promising to get in touch with them, and if they're not competent, to take disciplinary actions and probably even resort to some HR resolutions. Also, I would like to touch upon the topic of notifications, something that Ms. Olga was mentioning. Really, there were cases when the members of the families of MIS and KAS who was exercised using telephone or on individual basis, and respectively the Commander-in-Chief has adopted a document called the Protocol of Notification, which sets forth the procedure for notification, who is in charge of notification, the number of people, the team that notifies the family should comprise a psychologist and a medic. So such document is in place, it exists, it's approved by the Commander-in-Chief. If it's approved by the Commander-in-Chief, it's mandatory for fulfillment by all of the military personnel. And in case of its violation, please report so we can take actions. In the majority of cases, there is incompetence on part of the representatives of the armed forces, because armed forces are real large, and the specialists, or in order to raise them as specialists, we need time. Well, the armed forces are the most numerous part of the security and defense forces, unlike National Guard or State Bodyguard Service. So basically such cases sometimes arise, but if we get any information about such cases, we try to rectify all the errors, and we try to correct the persons that were appointed to such positions. And relatively speaking, the social support service in the armed forces of Ukraine that is vested in the CIMIC department is relatively young. The resolution on establishment of social support service was taken by the Commander-in-Chief in the end of the year 2024. We're only just heating up. You know, launching such a machine within the structure of the armed forces of Ukraine, it takes time, so please take it with understanding. We need some time to make it efficient, but one way or another, life is life. Human factor is everywhere. We're never going to build a perfect model. The problems are going to continue, but we are going to aspire to the perfect. Well, if we take this negative example of the Brigade 115, but at the same time, we would like to mention some positive examples, like in the 93rd Brigade, the social support service works almost perfectly. 3rd Assault Brigade, 5th Assault Brigade, there are competent people working there, and they are always open to communication. But really, sometimes the communication with the families is not sufficient because the majority of the problematic issues is being resolved at the level of military unit, and when it comes outside, it results in some miscommunication. When it comes to search of those missing in action, in accordance with the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers and the Central Department on Social Support is vested the responsibility on a rotational basis. The search and rescue teams keep working within our organization, but at the same time there are also complications because the war dated 2024 and its nature is unlike the nature of the war as of 2025. The nature of the war is changing, the new methods of the war are being applied, the number or the amount of electronic warfare is growing, the application of drones and other automated and robotized systems is being grown. And if back in the year 2023 the search team could search some location directly near the forward edge of the battle area, currently this distance may be up to 5 kilometers. They cannot approach because there are swarms of drones flying around, and without the individual electronic countermeasure systems and the electronic countermeasure systems for the machinery, they cannot work there because we are just going to lose the search and rescue teams in full. But still, we are implementing the pilot project. There was a training course to include the robotized systems, the unmanned ground vehicles as a part of those search and rescue teams so they can work closer to the forward edge of the battle area. But still a lot of locations where the people went missing is currently in the temporarily occupied territory, and our Ukrainian search teams cannot just physically go there. However, this problem is solved in a way that when we work in the territory under Ukrainian control, when it comes to those missing in action, like the last location where they went missing or where they were noticed, we retrieve the bodies of the aggressor party too, which are being returned to them as a part of repatriation process, and this is how we can retrieve our fallen heroes back home. You know that recently there was an exchange, and on the 28th the bodies of the 909 of our fallen warriors were repatriated to Ukraine. Also, we're developing the K9 units, the specialized K9 units that are trained to find the remnants of the rotting bodies. That's really efficient in cases of rocket strikes, debris. The trenches are covered with debris, and the dogs, they are real well trained to find dead bodies under that. What else I would like to cover? Well, Mr. Oleg, there is a question, about communication. Well, communication with all of the government institutions is well arranged. The military units on a monthly basis keep submitting information to us about the circumstances in which their representatives have gone missing in action. We systematize that information and provide that information to the coordination headquarters for double checking, and we also work with the representative of the Office of the Commissioner for Missing in Action. We submit quarterly reports about the locations where the rescue teams were working, what was the number of finds, like what was the number of those remnants, to keep track of the process of identification of personalities or identities. In the same way we have the information support department, we try to organize meetings or take part in the meetings with the families of those fallen ones and missing in action, with the representatives of the Commissioner for Human Rights. We organize the meetings with the representatives of civil unions, of the families of missing in action from different military units, and if there are some problems arising, we try to solve them. Mr. Oleg, as you've said, we understand that the armed forces is one of the biggest employers for the time being. There's a lot of people enlisted, and probably we would be unable to make it work perfectly, but the errors will be all the time, but still, what's important is the reaction. So what's your advice to the people who are facing some errors? Where should they report in case they come across some errors? Well, there are problems, but when it comes to the prisoners of war or missing in action or killed in action, it's always a priority for the commander-in-chief. Where should they report? They can report through our department when it comes to the CVS. Well, if it's about the military units, if it's about the violations that were mentioned by Ms. Olena, Ms. Yuliia, where should people report in case where there are some clear violations and responses definitely needed? Well, when there is a violation in terms of legislation, the representatives of police or other law enforcement services, again, there are law enforcement services within the structure of the armed forces, or otherwise they can submit an application directly to the general staff, and then the response will be given about the competence of those units, of those bodies in charge of those procedures. The appliers will be directly responded. Well, Ms. Olena, the floor is yours. So tell us about the importance of this coordination, communication between the government and non-government sector, families and the military, the units. Good afternoon. Thank you for your questions, for your stories. When it comes to the complaints, there is the Central Department for the Protection of the Rights of the Military in the General Staff. Also, the Office of the Commissioner for the Rights of the Military and their families also is working. This analytical survey and those problems that it covers, it's important to develop the problems with the legislation that is currently in effect. There was a question about the notification. There is an instruction number 280 by the Ministry of Defense about the listing of personnel, and it contains the notification form. And the level of competence, of professionality of the representatives of the staff in conscription offices, they should have this form because it clearly stipulates what they are supposed to mention. It says that the name of the military unit may be omitted in those cases, and sometimes the conscription officers don't mention the number of the military units, which is really important for the families, for exercising their rights to submit some reports to that military unit or applications. Well, again, when it comes to not only the level of competence, but the level of their empathy, just like Ms. Yuliia said and like Mr. Oleg has mentioned, that there are also negative cases, like in case of Brigade 115, but there are positive cases in other units. I'm the coordinator for communication with the families, and I'm in touch with the patronage services. There are really those who take their job really responsibly, not only in terms of their duties and functions, but also due to some human factors. And one of the brightest examples is the representative of the patronage service of the Brigade 93, who said that she was monitoring the absence of the missing in action in any criminal cases, systematized it all, and applied to the national police all by herself. This is how the social support services should work. And they also should unload the military units to reduce this term for processing of applications so that they don't become the complaint cases, so that the families could exercise their rights and interests timely, like families of the KAs or MIHRs. So the people taking positions like that, they should be checked not only professionally, but also in terms of their moral qualities, so that they understand that they are supposed to communicate with the most difficult category of the families, for whom the loss is not yet sure, whose reaction is not sure when they get such a notification. Based on my personal experience, I know that when a woman calls me who just got that notification, she is desperate. She doesn't know what to do. And just like Ms. Olena has said, that there should be the procedure that should be explained to those family members, and the same should be explained to the military, so that they should provide their DNA samples just in case, because different terrible things may happen. And again, sometimes that communication is coming on subjective basis due to some internal speculations of some individuals in charge of those issues. So again, establishment of patronage services, social support services, it's really important. There are units such as 3rd Assault Brigade who enjoy the help of their patronage service and other social support services. They are being established, and they are supposed to work not for Miss Yuliia to do their job, but for them to do their job and to know their job. Like they have a section who works with the missing in action, another one for working with the killed in action, and the third one for the POWs, so they can take this family and accompany them along all the steps of this procedure. And also the social support services should be established in the territorial communities for those women who have only button-down phones. So they should be a part of the local authorities who help the families of the missing in action to go through all those procedures. You know, there was a question, what has more impact, the improperly working procedures, or is it a human factor? You know, the procedures, they are already set forth. So I think it's more of a human factors. It depends on how professional those people fulfill their functions to help those old people. And those old people should understand where should they report. They should understand that the representatives of conscription offices are not supposed to use obscene lexics and to yell at those old women. And like some traumatic experience is not a ground for causing another traumatic experience for old people who get such terrible notifications. So I hope that support services are going to become this auxiliary mechanism that would reduce the number of complaints coming from the families of those missing in action about the difficulties in communication with the military units. And what's also important, there should be work done on part of conscription offices. There are different leaflets developed by coordination headquarters as a roadmap and developed by civil organizations, but they should be distributed not only for the conscription offices but also for the national police, because when it comes to the National Guard and national police units, they don't have communication with the conscription offices, and the families should be aware about what to do to make sure that they've done everything that depended on them in this situation, to find the information about their family members, about their loved ones, and then everything would depend on those organizations who are in charge for return of their family members, and the family should be explained why the information may be not provided for a long period of time, and also to avoid cases like the one described by Ms. Yuliia about the brigade number 115. So it's important to analyze it and to draw conclusions. And when it comes to AWOL, that's another topic that should be investigated, because really we frequently come across the cases when the units assign those people the AWOL status, which paralyzes all of the procedure for submission of documents because there are no notifications. The families are advised to provide report at least about the civilians who went missing. So again, it should be regulated on a legislative level in order not to assist to such situations. Well, and now I would like to give the microphone to the floor. If anybody has questions, good afternoon. I'm a journalist and a wife of a missing in action. I have a question to Mr. Dmitro. Do you improve the competence of your investigators? Because I was coming across the cases when in the orders the last names were written in incorrect way, or when you apply for materials of pretrial investigations, they respond that they don't know how to get in touch with the brigade, and they are not aware of any investigations within the brigade. So investigator has only taken the DNA sample, and they did not even respond if anything was identified. So is it really normal? Do you work on improving their professional skills? Well, right away, let me tell you, this is not normal. If the investigators has only sampled DNA and initiated a forensic examination and that's it, that's not normal. Well, when it comes to improvement of competences, you know, in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we had no unit whatsoever, no department that would be in charge of the not only missing in action, but the war crimes as well. Every crime, you know, every burnt vehicle, every burnt house is a separate war crime. And in March last year, in the main investigation department, there was a section established that was specializing in war crimes investigation. During half a year of its operation, the matter of those missing in action has gained such an intense traction that we were forced to establish another unit which would be in charge of missing in action alone, because the investigators who only document the shellings, they cannot work in other adjacent areas too. So it was established upon our initiative. When our department was established, there was the now you know that in every single region, in every oblast, there are regional representative offices, representative centers, and this is where those investigation officers work. They are in touch with each other. They communicate through WhatsApp group. The heads of the regional departments, they see the new legislation being approved and issued, the new procedures, but they have already procedures approved at the level of our commissioner, at the level of expert services. Those are the procedures and algorithms on forensic examinations, on specific matters on the amount of work they are supposed to fulfill within the framework of this or that investigation, because there are investigators who investigate the cases of people missing in action or identification and delivery of repatriated bodies. So those are different investigators, and depending on the facts that they study, they have different procedures, the minimum of what they're supposed to do. For example, to interrogate the witnesses, assign forensic examinations, add pictures, add videos, molecular genetic examination. If the families or other party submit caveat, the investigator is supposed to consider it within 3 days and either fulfill it or reject it. But again, if they reject, they should provide some document why they're refusing to do so. Is it irrelevant in their opinion? Because it happens so that the investigator may assign a forensic examination of the biological specimens, and the families, they want additional examination of the personal belongings, but that's not really necessary. And this is when investigators should respond like, that's not necessary because the specimens are already added to the database. If within 3 days an investigator doesn't respond to such request, it automatically means that they have 1 month to fulfill such a request. So if you need time to add some additional examination, forensic examination, add some materials, the investigators are supposed to take them and add them to the case. So again, in many cases, it depends on the investigators and the goals that you requested in them, that you're trying to achieve by that request. And may I ask another question from Mr. Oleg? Sometimes it happens so that the families are waiting for their certificate of investigation, and it says like there was an explosion and no one knows what happened next. So is there a way to improve it so that the families somehow know if their loved one ended up in captivity or killed in action? Well, look, the investigation is conducted within the unit and in accordance with the evidences they already right there. Like, well, what do you mean that their fate is unknown? So it means like that they have a status of MIA assigned. Yeah, look, if they cannot confirm the fact of death, if there is no body, they cannot put it in any different way. They cannot notify a family about the death of their family member. And in case if a person was captured but there were no witness of this, it cannot be confirmed either. If they are confirmed, for example, by ICRC, then the status would be updated to POW. Well, let me add, I was studying this matter as a human rights person, like where this term is coming. There is no single regulation that would say that when a military is going missing, there should be an investigation initiated. The request to provide this information to the family, it only appeared in the roadmap from the coordination headquarters without any legislation that would regulate it. That's why some of the military units, they don't provide this information, and it cannot be considered as a violation. For the time being, there is a working group, the task force that works on the new regulations or to amend the existing regulation about what should be done clearly, and it should be in order, because you cannot even contest such a document in court, because this document cannot even be a subject of any trial. Again, this situation depends on the quality of witnesses and quality of evidences that were provided during the so-called investigation of the missing in action. If there are direct witnesses who can provide direct evidences, it would improve the quality of this document that is being drawn as a result of the investigation. If there are no direct witnesses and there is only a report from the commander that, according to the information they're aware of, this and that happened, respectively, it would result in such conclusions that you describe. Is if there was no visual investigation of the territory, observation of the territory by the drones, when they say, like, please provide the footage, and I'm not even a military, but I understand that drones, they have different tasks. If there is a way to document something, but again, you won't be able to identify the bodies of those killed there. Again, it depends on the procedure, and you know, to demand more detailed investigation is not always possible. Again, when the military were attached to some unit and the units are difficult in terms of communication, that again is going to influence the result of this investigation. And it would be a claim to the military unit, but again, it will depend not only on the unit where they were serving, but also on the unit they were attached to. So it's not always a problem with those who are in charge of investigation. Thank you, Ms. Olena. And let's take the last question from Mr. Lorenzo.
Lorenzo Cremesi from Corriere della Sera from Italy, from Milano. Thank you to approach this very somber, very sad question. I have just a short question. You mentioned the last exchange of bodies, 900 remain of soldiers being exchanged with the Russian in the last days. Can you tell us, do you have any idea altogether from the beginning of the war how many had been exchanged? I'm talking about remain soldier from the beginning, and what is the rate, what is your capacity of identify to find the identity of this remains on for instance on this last 990 I think they were, how many you really identify, and altogether what you think it is the rate? Thank you.
Пане Олеже, до вас питання, мабуть, так?
Well, look, when it comes to bodies identification, that's a complex work. It's coordination of the operations of the investigators, Ministry of Internal Affairs. So when the bodies are being repatriated, they are being transported to the forensic examination facilities where the experts and investigators work on identification of their identities. I clearly know the figures, but I cannot give you them. Well, if it's possible, maybe some percentage. Like, what is the percentage of those whose identities were established? Well, the last repatriation only happened on the 28th of March, and in order to finalize the investigation, we need some more time. You know, it's a complex work to research every single body, every single piece of remnants.
The last operation just happened a few days ago, but can you tell us in general, if you look at the past, what is the rate of identification of the bodies that you can tell us? I'm not asking you about the number, I'm asking you the rate of identification.
Якщо говорити за процес репатріації в цілому, скільки з них, якщо можна, в відсотковому?
Well, look, we were able to retrieve more than 4,000 bodies.
Скільки з них ідентифіковано?
it's more of a question to the investigators because they are in charge of identification of the bodies. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for this important conversation about this important study, and obviously I would like to thank all those who were fighting and continue fighting for a country. I hope that this process that was discussed today is only going to improve, and month by month, year by year, we are going to improve this communication. Thanks everybody, and we continue working together for our victory. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes.